Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Power Briefing. I'm Howard Cleaver, Chief Commercial Officer of O3 Energy in Dallas, Texas. With me today is Robert Preston. He's the owner of Unhitched RV. So we're pleased to have him on the podcast today. Hi, Robert. How are you?
Hey, Howard. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
Doing
you're
great.
welcome. It's great to have you here. Let's just dive right in. So basically, let's talk about military precision to real estate vision. That's a nice rhyme, huh? That's
Good.
where you get into your background a little bit here and how you got into all this. So you had a unique journey from piloting V-22 Ospreys in the Marine Corps to building a major RV park portfolio. What leadership principles from your military experience have carried over into the real estate world?
Man, first awesome tagline. I might have to steal that. That's good. One of the things that there's a ton of correlations from aviation, particularly military aviation, I think into business in general and entrepreneurship, and then certainly specifically to what we do. And so as I think about it, even what we've invested in and what we're currently doing now, there's been a lot of solid planning, a lot of strategy, a lot of stuff that's put in place that certainly we do on every mission. When we flew, there would be tons of planning and prep. And then inevitably, when you get into it, everything changes and you have to adapt, right? So
Yeah.
I think that adaptability and flexibility component that we learn flying, where you prepare, you prep, you do the best you can, and then you get in the air and something changes and you have to, adjust from there. So that certainly, I think, correlates very well in what we do, right? We had a plan, it's there, market changes, things change, property changes, whatever, replan, readapt, and adjust and go from there.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah, I'd imagine. What is the saying in the military? Adapt something and overcome.
Adapt and overcome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. What mindset shifts were required when moving from flipping homes and multifamily to managing hospitality-focused RV parks?
Yeah. I think one of the larger shifts of perspective is the realizing that flipping houses is a transaction essentially, right? You're creating a product and then there's a buyer and then that relationship is generally over.
Yeah.
And then the other mindset when you go into, let's say, multifamily investing with apartment or mobile home community is certainly it's a longer term relationship between you and your tenants, but that is still, I would say, semi product based, right? You're offering them housing and they're offering you rent. And it's much more of a real estate feel. When you go into the RV park and campground industry, you're still offering a product and you're still building a relationship, but it is a service-based product at this point. So yes, technically you're renting them a space, but you're now transitioning outside of offering them a tangible product, i.e. space, to a service. And so you are now running a company that provides service more so than you are running real estate. So it's much more similar to a business than it is, I would say, real estate investing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Looking back, what do you think gave you an edge during the transition from asset-heavy operations to, I'm sorry, from asset-heavy type business to operations business? I think you answered that a little bit, but maybe you could delve into that a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the, most recent transitions for us as we continue to adapt and overcome is in the past we owned assets and then we operated them out of necessity. So we formed our own management company and now we own, half of our portfolio we own and the other half that we operate is owned by another owner, right? Or other owners. And so now we're providing that property management service. And so that's kind of a key difference there that when you own it and you're the manager, then you're playing two hats, but you're the same person. And so now learning and adapting to the idea that we're the operator, but the owner's someone else, there's a different type of communication that has to exist. And the lack of communication causes issues or over communication can sometimes cause issues. So really tweaking and adjusting the right things to communicate at the right time, at the right amount is something that we're honestly still learning and tweaking as we made that transition to broadening our services.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point about the over communicating because sometimes that can get that can get kind of dicey. So let's talk a little bit about how you're systemizing growth and in this fragmented industry that you're in. You mentioned that Unhitched is currently pausing acquisitions when we talked earlier before this podcast to create a more systematic operation. What processes or systems are you prioritizing to scale?
Yeah. So first, we're not pausing entirely. We're just slowing down,
Slowing down, gotcha.
taking a little bit of breather on the acquisitions. We've bought 3 properties so far this year. We've got a fourth one in the pipeline, but we're, taking a little bit of a breather there to process what's being brought in. One of the things that is key is the transition, whether from acquisition, we're going from the old owner to us, or we're taking on the property for property management and going from the old management company or ownership to our company, right? So that transition, that change management is super critical and can go really well or can go really poorly for the guests, for the team members, for the owners, for us. And so managing that process and really systemizing the checklist and systemizing all the things that need to happen, from bank accounts to software services to all the contracts in place, is a heavy emphasis to get that as standardized as possible, knowing that every property has a little bit of a twist or a little bit of tweak, but getting that, fundamental bedrock in place. And then we start looking at, for us, the 4 components we're always talking about is technology, operations, facilities, and marketing. And so in each of those 4 buckets, then we begin to either provide templates or provide standard SOPs, so on and so forth, so that we can bring up more of a franchise model to the process. Not that it's a franchise, but the idea is that if we were a franchise, we could give you the playbook and then you could go and run with it, right? And we want to essentially franchise ourselves to ourselves.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want every time to be the first time. That's for sure. And I'd imagine from your background being a pilot, checklists and standing operating procedures, that's just drilled into you.
It
So I
is.
bet that helped a lot.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly live or die by that.
Yeah. That's right. Literally.
Literally.
So you're approaching SOP development differently now that you're managing 24 parks. You've got 14 owned and 10 that are third parties. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, you're spread out quite a bit.
We are.
Um, what's been the hardest operational challenge to standardize across different properties and ownership types?
Great question. Hardest thing for us to standardize across an art type. Probably marketing,
Interesting.
because you're dealing with different climates, different times of the year, different
Yeah.
target customers, different types of properties themselves. So the variables that exist are almost innumerous. And so trying to put a process that always works on top of that is difficult. It's not undoable. And there are certain fundamentals that exist across all properties for marketing, but contextualizing that to every specific properties certainly is a pretty big challenge. And then, that's magnified, I think, with the idea that marketing itself is very complex and continues to evolve every day. And Google changes and Meta changes, and there's a new social platform that pops up that you got to know about, and TikTok.
Yeah, that's right.
So
And now you got AI in the mix too. It's
yeah,
just,
and then you have AI. So now there's AI optimization, which is something I never thought about last year. How do you optimize your website for AI? That's a thing. And we got to be able to do that. And then, so that number variable compounded by the number of properties with the number of variables that exist to the properties, I think that's a pretty significant challenge that we are facing and overcoming.
very interesting. Yeah, marketing didn't come top of mind when I was thinking about that question, and that really does. It's a very varied, approach that you have to take depending on the property, depending on the amenities, depending on the location, depending on the weather, like you said, the climate. Yeah, wow,
And you,
very interesting.
and you just think about the multipliers there of every property has a Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, email campaign, Google campaign, 24 times,
Yeah,
so on and so forth. So it just,
times all the platforms, times all the messages, times all the
yeah,
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about, we talked earlier before this podcast, and you're talking about there was a big COVID boom. Everybody wanted to get out of the house, get into nature, get away from things, and get a little freedom basically during that whole time. And let's talk about RV parks beyond the COVID boom, right? Now that we're in that period afterwards, you said it was normalizing the market, right?
yeah.
What what does the outsiders get wrong about the industry today? People that aren't in it.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the industry from the outside in, and let's say from an investment perspective, you got your investment lenses on and you look at this, and I would say the intangible feedback, right, is, well, every time I want to go to this park, it's always booked. Or every time all my friends try to stay at this park, I can never get a site. Right. There's this waiting list. And that is very true in many parks. But the missing piece there that people don't consider is that the time that they're trying to book specifically is also the time that everyone else is trying to book specifically, meaning your summer months, your holiday weekends, and just weekends in general. And so very easily this perception is that the occupancy of these parks are, 100% because they're on a waiting list. Well, the waiting list is for July 4th weekend. The waiting list is for June. The waiting list is for Thanksgiving. The waiting list is not February 6th in Iowa when it's minus 45. And so the error that I've seen most commonly made by either people who have actually investors who have actually drastically overpaid for parks, and or people's perception thinking that this is a relatively easy industry, or that there's a limited supply, is in the occupancy, dramatically overestimating the occupancy that they think they can achieve simply by taking anecdotal evidence from their experiences or other people's experiences.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, people probably think, oh, it's post-COVID, maybe not as busy, but then they don't take into account those peak times that you're talking about. Yeah, that's I used to live in Colorado, and Rocky Mountain National Park, they had to schedule everything, and then they've kept it just because, of the, same issues that you're talking about. It's yeah, it's pretty interesting. One of the things that we talked about as well is that, you know, private equity saw this big boom during COVID, and they kind of flooded the space, right? What do you think they underestimated about running RV parks?
Yeah, so they certainly overestimated the occupancy that they can achieve, and then they underestimated, they underestimated or failed to understand that it is a service component, right? That it is a hospitality service business. It is not the same as running a multifamily apartment complex. It's not the same as office or retail or any other things. Goes back to that kind of first question we talked about. So this is a hospitality business, no different than a restaurant, where you're serving a customer and giving them a product, but you're also giving them an experience. You're also giving them an interaction. You're also giving them the ability to have add-on stuff. And so that requires a lot of staff, and two, great staff. And so where you can maybe run several hundreds of units in a different investment class with maybe 6 people, several hundred sites in an RV park might be 30 or 40 staff. And so that payroll component there, and then goes back to, again, the seasonality ebb and flow, where you may have to plus up your staff to 200-300% during peak season, and then goes way back down to a minimum staff in the off season. And that is a lot of HR hiring and management work as well. So that's certainly an area that's probably not well understood when you're first getting into the space.
Gotcha. What would you say to investors who think the RV park opportunity is past?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, I think, the normalization of where we're at today. If you looked at a trend line for even the unit sales, dealership, the manufacturers selling RVs to the customers, we're right where we'd want to be. We're right on the same trend line that you could draw for the last 20 years. It's continuing to increase, but there's this bubble of 21 to 22 and 23. But if you take out the bubble, we're where we want to be. And so even in our underwriting, we go back and look at 2019 as a baseline. So with that, yes, the hype's over. I think the easy money's over, but it's still an amazing investment opportunity because of the barrier to entries are still very high as opposed to any other real estate investment class. So we're generally buying at very high cap rates, which allows us to really, out levered, out matched cash flow and cash on cash. And if you can figure out how to do it, then, there's certainly some economy of scales that don't exist or that we're achieving that generally don't exist in the market.
Let's talk a little bit about brand building. You've got a great brand there, Unhitched RV. So how do you build a scalable management brand? You've quietly launched a third-party management arm and brought in 10 clients in just 6 to 7 months, if I remember correctly. What's driving that traction that you're getting?
I don't I can't say I legitimately have a answer to that question. I do think that we built a brand over a long time. It just hasn't had a logo. So, and what that means is that we've been in the space for a while. We're known for doing what we say we're going to do, right? And we're known as an operator, as an owner. And so when we came to the market to provide third-party management services, that's what I tell the owners. Like, we're coming from the perspective as the owner, and we built them. We've made all the mistakes that you've made and that you're probably going to make. And so as an owner, that's how we're going to attack this. If we manage your property, we're going to treat it like ours. We're going to run it just like ours. I'm going to have the same demeanor and attitude, just like as one of mine. At the end of the day, you want to override me and veto us on a decision, great, that's your choice, and then we'll move on. But we are not passive in how we manage and operate, because we can't be passive as owners. And so I think that's a larger differentiator and what's really resonating with a lot of owners out there.
Yeah, you've walked in their shoes. You know exactly what their perspective is and what they expect out of management of a property. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. What kind of, I think you answered the question I was going to ask about how you differentiate, and that was a great answer that came out of that. What kind of owners are the best fit for your management services?
Yeah, and the best fit for us so far have been owners that are really looking for an opportunity to do something else in life. So a lot of our owners have been owner operators for quite a while, but they're either reaching an age or an income level or some type of internal, external factor they want to be freed up from the space, from that park. And they still love the industry. They still love what they're doing, but they want a little extra time, to be able to go
Yeah.
do that. So that's one of our key demographics. And then the other demographic is, a property maybe that is in a more struggling situation that,
Hmm.
that some size and some scale and some experience can bring allows us to capitalize on a lot of those opportunities that exist on the property level. So that's a good fit for us too. And then, all of our owners thus far, except for one, have a portfolio of properties, that they have, 2, 3, 4, 6 plus properties that we're bringing onto our portfolio, and that are like-minded in how we approach things and the objectives that we have. So that's, I think that's who we're looking for.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. That was interesting about the sort of turnaround piece
Yeah.
of the market that you're addressing as well. Those struggling properties, bringing your expertise to bear and kind of turning around their operation. That's a great one. Are your third party management clients open to energy upgrades, or is that something that you have to push from the top down?
Yeah, we're always looking for that. They are. It's one of our larger line item expense is always power.
Hmm.
And we've noticed, as everyone has in their home and in their businesses, that the cost of power has gone up significantly per kilowatt. The differentiator for us, and the reason that that's a bigger problem, is the amount of power we consume and then the inefficiency that all RVs are built on.
Yeah.
So they're never that well insulated unless you have a $2 million coach. And those are probably still not that as insulated as
Well, they
as
might be
your
efficient,
house.
but they're a $2 million coach, so they're
Yeah,
going to draw a
$2 million
lot of
coach.
power anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
they got they're 100-watt or 100-amp coaches out there. They have 5 or 6 air conditioners, so it is a lot of power consumption. Even the simplest thing for us, whether it's a tree, right? A tree providing shade is actually a pretty big energy saver. So we're always looking for those opportunities for energy.
Yeah. What are the biggest drains? I mean, besides the RVs, is there other things on the property that are big drains? Like, do you have pools, that sort of thing? What do you find?
Yeah, most of the parks have pools. Certainly, the pool pumps can be pretty significant power consumptions. Water can be consumed
Yeah.
inefficiently if we're not staying on top of leaks and loose fittings on water hoses and
Yeah.
the drip. Um, that's always concerning. Street lights, right? Those consume some power, not a lot. And then, of course, HVAC systems for the any structures, clubhouses and stuff.
Yeah. Or cabins, if you've got those on certain property. Yeah. That sort of thing. Okay. Have you implemented any solar, battery, or energy efficiency upgrades at your properties?
We haven't used any solar. We are on one of our new parks. We are installing a geothermal HVAC
Interesting.
system that also heats the hot water for the bathhouse and preheats the pool as well. So we've done that. We presently have not. We're experimenting and trying to figure out how to integrate solar that would both give us power and shade, which is a 2-for-1 win there.
Yeah. Yeah. Canopy type system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
canopy type system would
Yeah.
be ideal for
Interesting.
us.
Okay. Very interesting. What do you think about the ROI of sustainability? And, we can talk beyond energy too, having a sustainable property, what you're consuming, energy, water, consumables of any kind that are on the property. And not just financially, but from an operational and, risk mitigation standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I wish we could understand it better. For me as the owner, it always feels like it's a little bit hard to sift through the financial ROI of a lot of systems. Like we all want to be good stewards of the environment, particularly as a campground owner and outdoors. Like that is our product. It is nature, God's creation. Like that's what people are coming to see and do. Absolutely have to and want to be the best steward we possibly can. But there's, it's just, it feels like to the common person, which I would say I'm the common person here. It's hard to get that real ROI that's tangible. It's hard to get a solid number sometimes. To
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people, they think about those things, and of course, you see it as a line item on your OpEx that, utility costs are high, but, a lot of people haven't really thought about, hey, how do I put together an energy strategy or a utility strategy, and what are the pieces that go into it? So you're not alone there. We hear that a lot, and it is a big issue. So yeah, I'm glad that you're at least aware of it. That's one of those things that,
I'm unaware of my ignorance.
let's talk a little bit about the next frontier. Let's look forward a little bit. Uh, as you look at the next 12 to 18 months, where are you doubling down? Operations, energy, or something else?
Yeah, for us, it's probably acquisitions. As we mentioned a lot on the previous part of this call, the hype's over, the bubble's over. It's where we want to be. And now expectations are getting aligned more and more from sellers. Unfortunately, I would say the hype's over, but also because the hype's over, investors feel like that it's in a decline. It's not. It's just coming back to normal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel pretty strongly over the next, 12 months, 18 months, there's going to be a lot of real opportunities to acquire parks well below their market value. And we're ready to scoop them up.
It's great. If you could wave a magic wand, don't we all wish we could do that, right? And solve one problem across your portfolio today, what would that be?
This is not like a social issue.
What, triple rents? I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say like homelessness or something.
No. Across your portfolio. Unless you got homeless in your portfolio, I don't think that's
No.
happening. Yeah.
We're trying to solve that.
Yeah.
Across my portfolio. That's a good question. So across my portfolio, if I could solve it, it would be shade. Honestly, shade.
Shade. Huh.
Yeah.
Really
Shade.
interesting.
Shade, power, they're very direct correlation.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we could figure out how to economically build shade structures that are not ugly, that hold up to the weather, provide shade, that'd be amazing.
Huh. How about that? I would have never thought of that in 100 years. Yeah. Coming from a pilot, you want hangers, right?
I want hangers.
That's right. Yeah, we're coming to the end here. Just another question for you. What's your long-term vision for Unhitched RV? Just more parks, or are they adjacent industries or services you want to enter?
Yeah, we're certainly going to expand in both our ownership and management. And then we are working on, and I'd really like to expand more of the IP side of that. And we're working on some software systems right now. The data collection, the analytics side of it is not well captured in this industry. And so being able to provide some, institutional level data and analytics is, I think, a component where we want to go. And then providing, whether it's a SaaS type of software service for operations and or underwriting analytics would be, one of my larger objectives over the next 12 months.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, get a little deeper on the analytics and information technology side of things. Yeah, and with AI coming, I think that you'll be able to realize that relatively easily. Everybody always says relatively easily until they try to do it.
Easy.
Yeah, that's right. Until they try to plug into all those data streams, and it's like, oh my God, how do we get this together? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that concludes the podcast for now. Thank you very much, Robert, for being on. I appreciate your participation. Also, thank you for your service in the Marine Corps. Much appreciated by many.
Thank you.
Thanks again. That concludes the podcast.